The restaurant was bustling that evening, with the sound of clinking cutlery, murmured conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter filling the air. Among the crowd of diners, a young man sat quietly in a corner booth, exuding an aura of calm that contrasted with the lively atmosphere around him. He wore a simple outfit, nothing too flashy, but there was an unmistakable air of grace about him. The waitress assigned to his table, Claire, was a diligent worker who had spent years perfecting the art of balancing trays, remembering orders, and delivering smiles despite the fatigue that often weighed her down. Tonight, however, something felt different. Claire approached his table with her usual cheerful demeanor. "Good evening. Welcome to Ella's Bistro. Can I start you off with something to drink?" she asked, her pen poised over her notepad. The young man looked up at her with a polite smile and ordered a glass of water. His voice was soft, yet it carried a certain depth that made her pause for a moment. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't quite place it. As the evening went on, Claire noticed that he kept mostly to himself, occasionally glancing at his phone or looking out the window as the city lights flickered outside. He ordered a modest meal, a classic cheeseburger with fries and a side of coleslaw. Nothing extravagant, yet he seemed to savor each bite as if it were the finest cuisine. Claire couldn't help but wonder about him. There was a quiet kindness in the way he thanked her each time she refilled his water glass or checked on him, and his demeanor stood out in a way that was hard to explain. When it was time for him to settle the bill, Claire brought the check to his table with her usual smile. "Take your time," she said warmly. The young man nodded, pulling out a sleek black pen from his pocket. He wrote something on the receipt, folded it neatly, and placed it back on the table before standing up. As he left, he turned to Claire and said, "Thank you for your service. Have a wonderful evening." Claire watched him leave, still trying to shake the feeling that she had seen him somewhere before. She walked over to clear the table and collect the receipt, not expecting anything out of the ordinary. But when she unfolded the paper, her breath caught in her throat. There, in elegant handwriting, was a note that read, "Your kindness does not go unnoticed. Thank you for all that you do. Never stop believing in yourself." Below the note was a tip that made her eyes widen in disbelief. A crisp stack of bills amounting to $1,000. Tears welled up in Claire's eyes as she stood there, clutching the receipt and the money. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. It wasn't just the generous tip that moved her. It was the heartfelt message that accompanied it. In her years of waitressing, she had encountered all kinds of customers, some kind, some indifferent, and some downright rude. But this gesture was unlike anything she had ever experienced. As the initial shock subsided, Claire couldn't help but think back to the young man's face. The more she replayed the encounter in her mind, the more certain she became that she had seen him before. Then, it hit her like a bolt of lightning. He was Barron Trump, the son of the former president. She had seen his photos in the news and online, but he looked so much more grounded and humble in person than she had imagined. Claire's emotions overflowed as she realized the significance of the moment. She wasn't just moved by the generosity, she was overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness behind it. For someone of his stature to acknowledge her work in such a meaningful way felt like a validation of all the struggles she had endured over the years. She thought about her long shifts, the aching feet, and the countless sacrifices she had made to support her family. And in that instant, it all felt worth it. Word spread quickly among the restaurant staff as Claire shared the story with her co-workers. They gathered around, amazed and inspired by what had happened. Some of them even shed tears alongside her, touched by the humanity of the gesture. It wasn't every day that someone of Barron Trump's prominence walked into their little bistro, let alone left such a profound impact. For Claire, that night became a turning point in her life. She kept the note, framing it as a reminder of the kindness she had been shown and the importance of believing in herself. The money allowed her to pay off some overdue bills, but it was the message that stayed with her the most. It gave her a renewed sense of purpose and a belief that there was goodness in the world, even in the most unexpected places. As the weeks went by, Claire found herself thinking about the encounter often. She wondered if Barron had any idea of the ripple effect his gesture had created. His act of kindness didn't just brighten her day, it inspired her to pay it forward in her own small ways. Whether it was leaving an extra tip for a struggling barista or volunteering at a local shelter, Claire carried the spirit of that evening with her wherever she went. In the end, it wasn't just about the note or the money. It was about the reminder that every act of kindness, no matter how big or small, has the power to change lives. And for Claire, that realization was worth more than anything money could buy. As the days turned into weeks, Claire found herself constantly reflecting on the note Barron Trump had left her. It wasn't just a fleeting moment of kindness, it had become a source of strength during the challenges she faced. Life as a waitress was far from easy, and there were still days when exhaustion and frustration threatened to overwhelm her. Yet, every time she glanced at the framed note hanging on the wall of her modest apartment, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her co-workers noticed the change in her demeanor. Claire, who had always been kind and hardworking, seemed to radiate a new energy. She greeted each customer with genuine warmth, even the ones who were less than pleasant. She found herself going out of her way to make someone's day better. A little extra whipped cream on a child's dessert, a reassuring smile for a stressed-out parent, or a few kind words for someone dining alone. She had always cared about her customers, but now her actions were fueled by a deeper understanding of how much a simple gesture could mean. One evening, as Claire was preparing to end her shift, a regular customer named Mrs. Harris approached her. Mrs. Harris was an elderly woman who came to the bistro every Thursday for dinner. She had noticed the framed note on the wall behind the counter and had been curious about its significance. "Claire, dear," she said, her voice gentle but curious, "I couldn't help but notice that note. Would you mind telling me the story behind it?" Claire smiled and nodded, grateful for the chance to share. She recounted the unforgettable night when Barron Trump had left her the note and the generous tip. Mrs. Harris listened intently, her eyes glistening with emotion as Claire described how the encounter had changed her perspective on life. "That's a beautiful story," Mrs. Harris said softly. "It's a reminder that kindness can come from anyone, anywhere, and it can have a lasting impact." Word of Claire's story began to spread beyond the restaurant. Customers started coming in, not just for the food, but to meet the waitress whose life had been touched by an act of kindness. Some of them left her notes of encouragement, while others shared their own stories of how a small gesture had made a big difference in their lives. The atmosphere at Ella's Bistro seemed to shift, becoming a place where kindness and connection thrived. Claire's story even caught the attention of a local journalist who visited the bistro one afternoon. The journalist, intrigued by the framed note and the buzz surrounding it, interviewed Claire for a feature article in the city's newspaper. The article highlighted not only Barron Trump's generosity, but also Claire's unwavering dedication to her work and her newfound mission to spread kindness. The publication of the article brought a wave of attention to Claire and the bistro. Strangers from all over the city began to visit, inspired by the story and eager to support the small restaurant. Business boomed, and the owner, Mr. Miller, expressed his gratitude to Claire for being the heart of the bistro. "You've always been an amazing part of this team," he told her one evening. "But now, you've brought something even more special to this place." With the increased business, Mr. Miller decided to give back to the community in honor of Claire's story. He introduced a kindness special on the menu, with a portion of the proceeds going to local charities. Claire, thrilled by the idea, suggested starting with organizations that supported struggling single parents, a cause close to her heart, as she had raised her young son on her own after her husband's unexpected passing years ago. The kindness Claire had received continued to ripple outward. Customers began paying for each other's meals anonymously, leaving notes of encouragement for the staff and sharing stories of their own struggles and triumphs. The bistro became more than just a place to eat. It became a symbol of hope and compassion in the community. One day, months after that fateful evening, Claire received a handwritten letter in the mail. She recognized the elegant handwriting immediately. It was from Barron Trump. In the letter, he thanked her for sharing her story and expressed how glad he was to have made a difference in her life. He mentioned how much he appreciated her dedication and kindness, even though he had only spent a short time at her table. "You reminded me," he wrote, that the smallest actions can have the greatest impact. Thank you for showing the world what true kindness looks like. Claire read the letter with tears streaming down her face. She felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for the gesture itself, but for the reminder that her work mattered, that she mattered. She kept the letter alongside the framed note, cherishing both as symbols of a moment that had changed her life forever. As the years went by, Claire's story continued to inspire those around her. She remained at Ella's Bistro, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She loved the connections she made with people and the opportunity to brighten their days. And every now and then, she would glance at the framed note and the letter, smiling as she remembered the young man who had walked into her life on an ordinary evening and left behind an extraordinary legacy of kindness.